Hello and welcome to History for Weirdos.
We're your hosts, Andrew
and Stephanie,
and each week we're going to take you on a journey into the strange, obscure, and relentlessly entertaining corners of human history.
Now listen up, friends, because it's about to get weird.
Weirdos, welcome back to yet again another episode of History for Weirdos, the penultimate episode of Historical Mysteries July.
Yeah, we're almost done with the historical mysteries. We hope you guys have been enjoying them. We have.
Yeah, I definitely have.
Same here.
Yeah, especially now that it's your week once again, I'm going to really enjoy it.
And next week, when it's your week, I'm going to really enjoy it.
I think we love rubbing it in each other's faces every single time.
Yeah, because it is nice to just sit back and listen to stories.
I know. Well, Steph, before we get started, I know you just finished a book, and I think the Weirdos would be interested in learning more.
Didn't you also just finish a book?
I did as well. And I guess I'll get into it after you. Ladies first, though.
I just finished the Cleopatras, The Forgotten Queens of Egypt by Lloyd Llewellyn Jones. I may have mispronounced his last name, but this book was so interesting. First of all, I didn't know there were 7 Cleopatras in Egypt. I thought it was just the one that we think of, Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, Cleopatra and Mark Antony, but this book actually covers the women in her line that came before her in the Ptolemaic dynasty who were also named Cleopatra, and it gives you a really in-depth look at the world that these women lived in and why each of the Cleopatras is actually extremely significant in her own right. I highly recommend it. He does such an amazing job.
You know what's funny? I knew that the Cleopatra was Cleopatra the 7th.
Really?
But I had no idea about any of the preceding Cleopatras. I just knew that she was the 7th. And so I was like, oh, there must be 6 other ones.
Yeah. No, all very formidable women. And the Cleopatra the first in this instance is Cleopatra from the Seleucid Empire. Mm-hmm. She comes to marry a Ptolemy, and she is named after Alexander the Great's sister, Cleopatra.
Yes, exactly. It all goes back to Alexander every single time.
I knew you'd love that.
I know. Either Caesar or Alexander, I swear.
And tell us, what book did you just finish reading?
So we must be on an ancient history kick, at least in terms of reading, because mine was 1177 BC, the fall of civilizations. And of course, that tracks in great detail, the fall of kind of all those empires at the end of the Bronze Age. So the Bronze Age collapse.
The Bronze Age collapse.
It all goes back to the Bronze Age collapse as well.
Yeah. I remember folks were really requesting that episode for a while, but I imagine this book goes into extreme detail.
Yes. So if you listen to our episode and you wanted more, I highly suggest reading this book. It will give you, I think, more details than you could have possibly asked for. It was a very detail-oriented book.
This is for the true ancient history nerds out there.
Exactly. If you really want to learn more about the Mitanni people, for example, you will learn a lot about them. Yes.
I don't even know who they are.
They're Bronze Age people in Syria, but...
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I don't know much more, if I'm being honest, besides that.
That's okay. That's okay. So we just wanted to share those books in case any of the weirdos want to know what we're reading and are looking for historical reads themselves.
Exactly. So now that we have that out of the way, Steph, without further ado, why don't you regale us with your tale?
Yes, of course. So for this week, we are diving into a story that has a very obvious mystery, but also a secondary mystery. One mystery is a solved mystery. The other remains unsolved.
So is this mysteryception?
Yes, exactly. So let me get started. In August of 2012.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You remember.
I do remember.
The University of Leicester, the Richard III Society, and the Leicester City Council embarked on a groundbreaking archaeological endeavor, the search for the long-lost grave of King Richard III, the last English monarch to fall in battle. This ambitious project captured the imagination of many historians, as you can imagine, but also the public. The public was very invested in this mystery, and this was King Richard III is one of England's most controversial figures, so that's partly why everyone was so interested.
Yeah.
And today we will dive into the life of King Richard III and the 500-year mystery of his remains. And like I mentioned, there is a mini bonus mystery also related to our polarizing king.
Oh, wow. Okay. Is he polarizing at all or more famous? Well, no. I think I'm already going to answer my question. I was going to ask, is he more famous because of William Shakespeare?
You know, I only remembered to mention Shakespeare at the very end.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, but that is definitely one of the portrayals that feeds into the narrative that makes him polarizing.
Yeah, that's why I think, at least in modern society, why Julius Caesar is so popular is because of Shakespeare.
And his positive portrayal of him.
Positive-ish.
Positive-ish?
Yeah.
Positive enough. I think it's way more positive than Richard III.
Probably.
Because Caesar was writing for his audience, right?
Exactly.
Or not Caesar, Shakespeare. Shakespeare was writing for his present-day audience. His queen was a descendant of the enemies of King Richard III.
I was going to say that, like, very different circumstances there. Like, everyone in Rome, they're long gone.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this is still kind of recent history.
So he had to make the guy look bad. And we're going to talk a little bit about if he was bad or not, more or less.
Very interesting. Okay.
But let me get into his background first. So Richard III was King of England from June 26, 1483 until he died in 1485. Short.
So only 2 years. Wow. That's crazy. He's such a well-known monarch and he only ruled for 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was the last king of the Plantagenet dynasty.
Whoa.
And he came from the House of York. I actually am not sure, and I'm so sorry, weirdos, I should have looked that up, if I'm pronouncing Plantagenet correct.
I think you are. That sounds correct.
If it's not, someone's going to correct me, so it's okay. We will all learn together.
So true.
So Richard is born on October 2nd, 1452 in Northamptonshire. I'm probably also saying that wrong. And he is the youngest surviving son of Richard the Third Duke of York. Not Richard the Third, but Richard the Third Duke. So confusing.
Yeah, not to be confusing at all, right?
Yeah. And his mother, Cecily Neville. He had a really big family of 11 siblings.
His parents got busy.
Yeah. Of course, as was common in this day and age, a lot of them didn't live to adulthood, but still very big family nonetheless. And during his adolescence, I do want to mention that Richard, at that point, we know for sure that Richard developed a sideways curvature of his spine, also known as scoliosis, due to an unknown cause. No one knew what was happening, but they could tell his spine was curving. And I need you all to remember this for later.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to leave it at that for now. Richard III's childhood was marked by the turbulent onset of the War of the Roses.
Yes.
A period of political unrest and civil war that divided England. Richard's family, they were the Yorkists.
Mm-hmm.
And they supported Richard's dad's claim to the throne. And they opposed King Henry VI and his queen, Margaret of Anjou. And they are the Lancasters.
Yeah.
So those are the two sides that are fighting. I am going to get into the War of the Roses very shortly. And I want to say this is such a brief overview because there were so many battles, so many twists and turns. It's wild.
I mean, I feel like we could have a really in-depth episode.
Just on that.
Exactly. And it would be a really long episode.
Yeah, I agree. And tell me, I know you want to mention it. What famous show is based off of this?
Yeah, I was itching to say something, yes. So if you are a fan of Game of Thrones, the War of the Roses should be very familiar as it is based off of it. Mm-hmm. The show is based off of the War of the Roses, to be clear.
Are you sure the War of the Roses wasn't based off of Game of Thrones?
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Can you imagine? Yeah, no, I think the War of the Roses actually inspires a lot of fictional period pieces. And when you learn about it and then watch Game of Thrones, I bet you can see the parallels more easily. I knew that because you had shared that fact with me, but I never really understood how they were connected until I did a deeper dive.
Yeah. It's a wild like twist and turn. It's very dramatic.
It's very dramatic. We're going to get into it right now. So the War of the Roses, I also see it written as Wars of the Roses, which sounds more appropriate because there are like multiple wars depending on the generation. So that tells you a lot of what's coming on.
Yeah.
So again, these take place in England during the latter half of the 15th century. It's essentially a series of civil wars. So multiple civil wars, terrible for a country, of course. And these are the two branches that we're talking about, the House of York and the House of Lancaster. They're also related to each other.
Of course they are. Of
So
course they are.
To me, once I realized that, I was like, this is so dumb.
It's so unbelievably stupid. Like, I mean, Civil War in general, a lot of the
Yes.
time is just, it's just a waste. The only people that benefit are war profiteers. Mm-hmm. The only people.
So both houses claimed a legitimate right to rule, right? Because they both descend from Edward III. The Yorkists, they adopted the symbol of a white rose. And the Lancastrians had the symbol of a red rose. Hence the Wars of the Roses.
That's really interesting. Also, the color schema is really interesting too, because obviously incredibly different circumstances, but red and white reminds me of like the Russian Civil War.
You're right.
Right? The reds versus the whites.
It's such an interesting connection. I never thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no other like similarity, but except for red versus white.
I think both of those colors are very symbolic throughout human history. So
That's
it makes
true.
sense that we keep falling onto those as a human race. So these wars are marked by political intrigue, shifting alliances, so a lot of drama there, and many bloody battles. They obviously cause a significant disruption and instability in England and for the English people.
Of course.
But do these royals care? No, they don't.
They never do.
They never do. And the crown actually changes sides multiple times throughout these wars.
Yes, exactly. I did know that.
It's wild. I'm jumping around. Like I said, this is very brief because we're focusing on Richard III.
Right.
So in 1460, the Yorkists, his family side, they're victorious in a crucial battle. And they claim several victories over the Lancastrians. On July of that year, they defeat their rivals at the Battle of Northampton. The queen of the Lancastrians, Queen Margaret, she flees with their kids to Wales, and Henry VI is captured. And then when Richard II returns to London after this battle, he is crowned king.
Okay.
But that's far from the end of it.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So with King Henry in his grasp, Richard, and we're thinking of Richard Sr., Henry Sr., it's kind of a way to look at it. Richard seizes the opportunity to solidify his position. He declares himself and his sons as Henry's successors. So I think this was a strategy to make it look like we aren't usurping. We are choosing to sort of redirect the line here because we're all family.
Right. Smart.
Henry accepts this proposal under the condition that he's like, okay, I'll make you and your sons my successors. Just let me be the king until I die. I love the crown. It's so cute. And they agree to this.
Did he use those words exactly?
Mm-hmm. I love the
Okay.
crown. It's so cute.
Fair.
This agreement is known as the Act of Accord,
Ooh, the active accord.
which just sounds very British to me. And it was approved by the English Parliament. However, even though Henry accepted, Henry VI, Queen Margaret is like, oh, hell no. And she rallies another army, comes back from Wales, and challenges the Yorks again.
This is incredible. I love the tea here.
This is kind of a badass queen.
Kind of, yeah. Well, not even kind of, definitely.
Yeah, she's standing by her man.
Yeah, she really is.
So Richard II mobilizes his forces to face Margaret's army now and to settle this succession dispute once and for all. The clash between the two occurs at Wakefield Green near Sandal Castle, but the outcome wasn't exactly what Richard had envisioned. He dies. He tragically loses his life, and this is a graphic detail. His severed head is put on display and is really cruelly adorned with a paper crown.
Oh, that's not very pleasant.
That's not polite.
No.
So in the wake of his father's death, Richard's son, Edward, not Richard III, Edward, the Earl of March, takes up the mantle for his house and his family, and he continues to fight against the Lancastrians.
Wow. Okay, this is really twisty-turny.
Twisty-turny. Amidst the winter of 1461, Edward's forces secured a victory at the Battle of Mortimer's Cross. However,
Of course, there's a however.
weeks later, they suffer a significant defeat at the Second Battle of St. Albans, where King Henry gets rescued. I don't know why he's there. Why'd they take their prisoner? I don't know. I don't know the details. But he gets rescued by his troops, and he's reunited with his queen.
Yay!
Yay for them, yeah. But despite this setback, Edward is like, I'm resilient.
Yeah.
I can do this. And in March of 1461, he confronted the Lancastrian army in a fierce battle during a snowstorm, so like super dramatic, in near Towton, which is North Yorkshire. The brutal clash here is made up of an estimated 50,000 men.
Oh, wow.
With a devastating death toll of around 28,000.
That's huge also for like the medieval time.
That's really big.
I mean, I know this is late medieval, but still, like that's a really, really big, army and casualty.
Huge loss of life.
Yeah.
Again, this really would have affected so many of the English peasantry, for lack of a better word, the common people. But royals don't care. So I'm clearly not a monarchist.
Yeah, no, we're also Americans,
Yeah.
so.
So the Battle of Towton becomes a grim landmark in English history. It is considered the bloodiest one-day battle ever fought on English soil.
Wow, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. That's a huge deal because there have been a lot of bloody battles there.
Mm-hmm. The Yorkists, they emerge triumphant, and they force Henry, Margaret, and their son to flee once again, this time to Scotland, paving the way for Edward's ascension to the English throne.
And this is Edward, who is Richard III's brother. Older brother, I'm assuming.
No, this is his son.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, Richard II had a ton of kids, and Richard III is actually one of the youngest of those
right.
kids.
So, yeah, no, this is his older brother.
Oh, Richard III's older brother.
Yeah.
Yes. I thought you meant Richard II. It's annoying when they all choose the same name.
It is, and it's really, it just makes things more complicated. It's kind of like learning about the Carthaginians in the ancient world. They're all named like Hanno or Hannibal.
Yeah. I will
Or
say...
Mago.
Oh, my tia Mago.
Yeah.
I will say, if you do read the Cleopatra's book, literally everyone is named Ptolemy, Cleopatra, Bernice, and Seleucus. Yeah, like they have maybe 4 or 5 names max. So it gets really confusing.
Antiochus as well.
Antiochus, that's the big one for the men, yeah. Aside from Ptolemy, Antiochus is huge. And then every once in a while they throw in a Memphis or an Alexander as a middle name for fun.
Of course.
So we have Richard's elder brother, like you mentioned, Edward, on the throne. But he doesn't live long. He dies in 1483. I don't know why. To be honest, I didn't look it up. And his son...
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. His son, Edward V, becomes king.
Oh my God, I thought it was going to be Richard, and it still isn't.
No, it's still not Richard. Richard III acts as Edward V's Lord Protector, because I think Edward V is a very young boy. He's a child. He can't rule. So Richard is like his guardian. But because things are not easy in this story, Parliament declares that Edward V, this little boy, and his younger brother are actually illegitimate heirs. And Richard III is considered next in line, so he becomes King of England. Per the sources that I saw, it looks like Richard III may or may not have, I don't have 100% certainty either way, been the person to put that idea in Parliament's head that his nephews were illegitimate.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. If it sounds like something out of like a Netflix TV show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'd think, those are my nephews. I'm so happy for them. I still get to live in a castle and party. You think he'd be happy. But no. He wants the power. And that brings us to The Princes in the Tower, which I'm sure so many weirdos have heard about. You read it on so many listicles. You see it on Reddit all the time. Richard III, once he becomes king, he confines his nephews to the Tower of London.
Oh my gosh.
He says it's to safeguard them.
Right. The jail is where you safeguard.
He's keeping them safe, babe, because that would be really difficult to get them from there, from the big tower.
It is true. It is hard to get there.
However, the boys, they're aged 12 and 9. They're so little. Are now famously known as the Princess in the Tower because they disappear under mysterious circumstances. Most people believed that Richard III had them killed to prevent any threat to his reign.
Wow.
While others thought they were murdered by their uncle, another brother, the Duke of Buckingham, or another family member. Most theories suggest that the boys were killed, right? However, we don't have evidence for that. Some believe, and some still believe, that the boys maybe escaped with the help of family, and they just kind of were whisked away and vanished.
I hope so. That's what I'm banking on.
That would be really nice.
Right, because there weren't any like bodies that were found.
We're going to get to that right now.
Okay.
So the fate of the princes in the tower remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. This is our second mystery. This is the mini mystery I was talking about.
Ooh.
Later on, after these boys go missing, several people come forward claiming to be one of them.
Oh my God, of course. It's like Anastasia all over again.
I knew you would say that. Yes,
Yeah.
It's just like Anastasia. The most notable was a young man by the name of Lambert Simnel. In 1487, he claimed to be Prince Richard, the Duke of York, but later recanted, claiming instead that he was a cousin of the prince, and he's actually the Duke of Warwick.
Sure you are, buddy.
Yeah, because we're totally going to believe you now.
Yeah.
And then from 1491 to 1497, a man named Perkin Warbeck claimed to be the Duke of York, with even the Duke's aunt, the Duchess of Burgundy, supporting his claim, saying, yeah, that's my nephew.
Okay.
So that's interesting.
That is interesting, but we've seen how that has worked out before.
That's true. Accounts written after the disappearance so afterwards, nothing concurrent, name Sir James Tyrrell as the one who murdered the princes, acting, of course, on Richard III's authority. So he's the actual assassin. But this information comes much later.
Right.
So who knows?
Exactly.
Then, a little time jump. In 1697,
Wow.
workmen at the Tower of London were conducting excavations. They were doing some renovations, basically. So they're digging things up, and they find a small box beneath a staircase. Inside this box are two small remains.
No.
Yeah. Very clearly children. At the time, everyone assumed, oh, those were the princes.
Oh, wow. Like even 200 years later, they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, because people were always fascinated with what happened to those boys. People assumed, okay, it must be them. At the time, it's King Charles II on the throne, and he ordered these remains to be interred in Westminster Abbey, believing as well that these are the princes in the tower. And those remains are still there to this day.
Oh, and we've been to Westminster Abbey.
And the Tower of London.
That's true.
Yeah, pretty cool. However, even today, there's no definitive proof that these bones belonged to the young princes. The mystery continues to intrigue us because modern scientific analysis of the remains has not been permitted. The Church of England has denied all permissions to examine the remains.
Wow, we are seeing a lot of themes here in this month, right? A lot of religious kind of authorities not letting scientific analysis of bodies.
Catholic Church, Russian Orthodox Church, and now the Church of England.
This is wild. 3 times out of what, 4 episodes?
It's so weird.
Yeah.
They got to get it together.
Yeah. There might even be a 5th next week.
Ooh. So, the final resting place and the true fate of the princes in the tower remains an open question today.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a high likelihood, but not like super high either.
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't think those were the only children to ever be in the tower. I mean, Queen Elizabeth as a child was in the Tower of London.
Yeah,
her dad put her there.
Which is psychotic.
Yeah, he was a loser.
Yeah, Henry VIII. Stephanie loves him.
Yeah, I do. So before we move on to our second larger mystery here, let's look at what Richard III was like as a monarch.
Yeah.
We saw that his reign was brief, but it is full of controversy and conspiracy.
Of course it is.
So official registers from his reign show that the king was a reformer who believed in justice and sought to improve property management laws specifically and general public morals. He abolished the forced gifting from landowners to the noble class, where a noble could just be like, that's yours, that's mine, because it's on my land. Right. He was like, no, we're getting rid of that. That's so dumb. But the economy was in a really bad place because they just had a bunch of civil wars. And they had the threat of France was threatening to invade because England was weak.
Of course. Always the English and the French fighting each other during like, what, the course of 800 years or something like that.
They're such frenemies. Yeah. So this threat and the need for money for an army unfortunately makes him have to reinstate this unpopular practice so that the nobles can steal people's land and get money to give to the army.
Not a good look.
Not a good look. And King Richard III's only legitimate son, also named Edward, I know. He dies at the age of 10, unfortunately. And Richard III's wife dies a year after. This is in 1485.
Oh my gosh.
So 1 year, he loses his son. The next year, he loses his wife.
So he is just like, he's just going through the ringer. He's lost his dad. He lost his brother. His nephews disappeared under dubious circumstances.
Either he killed them or he didn't, and everyone thinks he did.
Right. Either way, that's bad. And then you lose your son and your wife.
Yeah. Not good times.
That's not worth it. I know, like, being a monarch and having to go through all that just so you can reign for, 2 years, if that?
Sorry.
No thanks.
That sounded so sad.
I know.
Because it is. And as we can imagine, he's devastated at this point.
Of course.
To top it all off, on his good luck, rumors start circulating as soon as his wife dies that Richard III is intending to marry his niece, Elizabeth. But
oh my God.
Elizabeth is not our Elizabeth, it's just another Elizabeth. But he publicly denies these rumors, and they're never substantiated. In fact, there's evidence that Richard was actually pursuing a marriage with a Portuguese princess.
Ooh.
And he was arranging a marriage between Elizabeth and the Duke of Beja. I really wanted to read that as Beja. Beja. But these plans didn't come to fruition before his death. Spoiler alert.
I mean, I feel like we all knew that was coming.
So that part really sucks. Like, he's trying to get his niece married. He's trying to find a new wife because he's king and he has no heirs. He's grieving and everyone's like, ew, you want to marry your niece.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And he's like, no, I don't, you guys. Leave me alone. So that sucks for sure.
That does.
Much of what history has remembered about Richard III is that he was a tyrant, a murderous king, bent on incest. And this largely seems to come from Tudor propaganda after the fact.
I'm not surprised. You know, I will say Henry VIII and Elizabeth, and I don't know much about Mary, to be honest. I know those two were really good at propaganda. They really knew what they were doing.
I don't know about Mary either. I know she was really good at killing people.
She was.
So that's not a great one either. Really interestingly, Felicia, our research assistant, put this in my notes, which I really liked, that the Encyclopedia Britannica seeks to balance this portrayal of him, claiming that many people are loyal Ricardians. Such a cute word. Saying that, in fact, he was actually considered to be a good Christian, a good husband, a good dad by his contemporaries, a loyal ruler, a good citizen, and someone who really believed in the importance of good governance.
Okay.
So they see him as very moralistic. There are also claims that this is definitely Tudor propaganda, that his mother had a difficult birth with him and that when he was born, he was extremely deformed.
Oh my God. That's definitely propaganda.
There's no record of his mom having any issues. I mean, she had a lot of kids. I'm sure she was fine. And he did have scoliosis, like I mentioned, but we do know that the scoliosis wasn't severe enough to cause any significant physical deformities, for lack of a better word, or physical evidence of it. He may have just had a little bit of uneven shoulders, but a lot of people do.
Right.
We're not sure that anyone would have noticed it.
Right. And did it seem to cause him a lot of pain or?
No.
Okay.
It didn't seem to cause him pain, from what scientists today can tell. So according to Michael Hicks, author of the book Richard III, The Self-Made King, kind of a cool title.
Yeah.
Richard's reign as king is considered catastrophic in the sense that he leaves behind a really disappointing legacy. He achieves very little because he has such a short amount of time. The only thing that he's really able to achieve is restarting a lot of conflict between these two families, which isn't good.
No.
So despite his unsuccessful reign, Hicks argues that Richard III set himself up again as a reformer. I think when they say reformer, based on what I read, it means like social reforms. So to create more equality in England. And he really wanted to distance himself from the unscrupulous and immoral court practices that had existed before him. And he seemed to be really focused on hard work. So very waspy of him.
Yeah, very, very waspy indeed.
Yeah, he's like, you guys just gotta stop with all your licentious behavior and get to work.
Even though Protestantism didn't even exist at this time.
So during his time as king, really the thing that we think tainted his reputation was the disappearance of his nephews. That was kind of like the foothold for a lot of the Tudor propaganda against him. And it's something that, again, no one knew what happened, but even people that had been supporters of him, once they found that out, that these boys had gone missing, they kind of lost love for him.
Right. Like
everyone assumed he killed them.
You can't kill children and be the good guy.
Your nephews.
Your nephews on top of that. That's right. Jeez Louise. Yeah, you're done.
When you are appointed as their protector.
Yeah, like, I mean, you can't trust that person.
Yeah.
That person is entirely untrustworthy.
Yeah. Again, we don't know for sure, but that is absolutely what most people thought.
Right.
And then others believe that history is a bit unfair to Richard III. A lot of his actions are similar to other monarchs of the time. And again, it's believed that history has relied too heavily on Tudor propaganda for a very long time. So we don't actually have a very clear picture of what he was like. Now I'm going to get into the battle at Bosworth Field.
Ooh, Bosworth Field. I know where this is headed.
Of course you do, you big history nerd.
It's almost like we should start a podcast or something.
Oh my gosh. Nah. So the battle at Bosworth Field took place in August of 1485. Henry Tudor, this is Henry the Seventh at this time, he leads the attack against the crown, against Richard III. Henry and his supporters arrived in England on August 7th. They start marching towards London. As they made their way through the country, Henry starts gaining more supporters.
Wow, people are just like joining up.
People are joining up because everyone's like, ew, that guy killed his nephews and he wants to marry his niece, right?
Right.
So Richard III, he has his forces divided into 3 groups because, as we've seen sort of throughout this episode, even the king at this time relied heavily on the armies of his lords. So he has the Duke of Norfolk, the Earl of Northumberland, and then because Richard's family was originally dukes themselves, he has his family's army.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he has 3 armies. Norfolk's men are the first to go up against Henry's men, and they fail pretty quickly. And then Northumberland and his men witness Richard being attacked on the battlefield, and they do nothing to help him. People say either they did nothing on purpose because there was a personal issue between Richard and the Duke of Northumberland, that there was beef between them. And then others argue that looking at the battlefield, it seems like the location where his men were stationed, yes, you could see what was happening, but you couldn't advance in time to rescue him.
Right.
I don't know.
Either way, though.
Either way, they witness their king being taken and killed. So Henry's men saw the king and his knights. They were vulnerable and open, so they surround him. They kill Richard III. Henry VII becomes the new king. So again, another new king. The Battle of Bosworth is marked, of course, by the end of Richard III's reign, the end of the Plantagenet rule. It's the beginning of the Tudor dynasty, and it also signals, finally, the end of the War of the Roses.
Yeah, finally. And that's like the abridged version, too.
Super abridged, guys. Henry VII marries Elizabeth of York, Richard's niece.
Wow.
That he was trying to secure a marriage for. He does this for political reasons, to win over the remaining Yorkists.
Right, that makes sense.
He said he believed the marriage would help unite the 2 warring families and England. And he's right. It does appease a lot of people. And that ending is why I think this was so stupid. Why didn't you guys just do that to begin with?
Right at the beginning, like...
Let's just marry each other. We're royals. We all do marry our cousins anyway.
They're just, I think, so power hungry, it blinded them.
It's a lot of power hungry, ego-driven men.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster, honestly. It's not gonna end well.
Mm-hmm. So, following the victory, the men who died in battle were buried at St. James's Church. However, Henry refused to lay Richard to rest immediately.
Oof.
Henry instead had Richard III's body stripped naked, tied to a horse, and carried to Leicester. to openly display proof that the former king had died.
Ooh.
Isn't that cruel?
That's really awful. Jesus.
I could see how this man is the father of Henry VIII.
Yeah. That's interesting because I hadn't really heard too much of Henry VII, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's so unnecessary.
It's really, really unnecessary, honestly.
The humiliation part, I just don't understand. So finally, after 2 days, he allows people to take down his body, and Richard is buried in a plain tomb in the Church of Greyfriars. Unfortunately, the church is demolished in 1538, leaving Richard's remains lost.
Oh my goodness.
Richard III's remains would go missing for approximately 527 years.
That's so wild.
Isn't that insane?
Yes.
So now we are going to get into what happened.
Finally. Yes, let's hear it. I need to know more, Steph.
Well, the University of Leicester, as I mentioned, in collaboration with the Richard III Society
Yes.
and the Leicester City Council, they take on the ambitious quest of solving this mystery. Incredibly, their efforts unearthed more than they could have hoped for.
Oh,
Get it?
lovely.
Unearthed?
Unearthed?
They were digging.
Thank you.
Okay. So not only did they rediscover the Greyfriars Friary,
Oh, lovely.
but nestled within its grounds, they find a skeleton. And what they find intriguing about this skeleton is that it bears the marks of battle. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Lots of men would have been involved in battle during this time. But the skeleton has an S-shaped curved spine.
Oh, snap.
What did I tell you to remember before?
The scoliosis.
He has scoliosis, so this gets them really jazzed. They're like,
Like,
wait a
oh
second,
boy.
we know someone with a curvy spine. So the body had all the hallmarks of a hurried burial. Like someone was like, oh shit, we just got to bury this guy. There's no coffin. It's not laid out carefully. It wasn't even wrapped in a shroud. And it's actually, the body's too big for the grave. You can tell that the head was kind of like scrunched when it was originally buried.
Oh.
So whoever was doing this was trying to do it quickly. And I imagine that that's probably because Henry VII didn't want him buried at all. But these friars in Leicester took pity on it and wanted to bury these remains properly. So to figure out whose remains these were exactly, simply extracting DNA wouldn't tell them anything. And we're about to get into some sciencey stuff that
Ooh, sciencey stuff. I want to hear more about that.
that I am not an expert in, but we're going to try. So it actually requires comparing DNA from the skeletal remains of the body with that of known relatives, also similar to Anastasia
Yeah.
and the Romanovs.
That's right.
So Professor Turi King at the University of Leicester collects the DNA samples from Richard III's living female line and male line relatives, and he carries out an analysis on these samples. So I'm going to explain these two lines because it's interesting. They're different. So mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, it's like a special family marker that's only passed on your mother's side.
Right.
Only daughters can pass it on. So if you share a maternal ancestor with someone, you likely share similar mtDNA with them.
Mm-hmm.
Since Richard III and Anne of York, his sister, had the same mother, they would have shared the same mtDNA, which is important because, as we recall, Richard III's only legitimate son dies in childhood. There were rumored illegitimate sons, but those rumors are never substantiated.
Right. And
We don't have track of those lines
exactly.
anyway.
It's a moot point.
Yeah. So this means that if his sister Anne had any daughters, and those daughters had daughters, and so on, that the mtDNA would be passed down through the generations.
Oh, snap. Okay.
So you're relying on a lot there. Luckily, for a very long time. As we know, people had 1 million kids. Odds are you're going to get a daughter in there. And they did. So the living relatives of Anne of York are found. And their names are Michael Ibsen and Wendy Duldig.
Whoa.
They test their DNA, and the DNA results showed a perfect mitochondrial genome match between the skeleton at Greyfriars and Michael and Wendy.
Oh my God. So it is Richard III.
We have half the equation at this point, right?
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
There is a small mutation that they pick up on between the remains and Wendy, but this is not unexpected. It's considered sort of a common thing to happen with such big distance between generations.
Right, like centuries.
Yeah. So they're like, no, the weird mutation doesn't matter. They're absolutely related.
Okay.
And weirdos. This is where I want to reveal a surprise fun fact for you all. I am also a descendant through this line. So I am also related to Richard III through my father's maternal line.
Yes, I know. I had to keep my mouth shut on this one because obviously I knew, guys, but I couldn't say anything.
Yeah, I may have mentioned it in previous episodes, but I hope that you forgot if I did, because I wanted that to be a little like bonus surprise.
I know, that is pretty cool.
And you know what else?
What?
I also have scoliosis, like Richard III.
Damn. So Richard III might not have given it to you, but like you guys share an ancestor who gave it to both of you.
Maybe, yeah.
Like his mom or his dad or...
It's pretty genetic. And when I mentioned that his shoulders were reportedly uneven, mine are too.
Whoa.
Because of my scoliosis. My right shoulder goes up higher than my left. Chiropractors love to point that out to me.
You're like, thank you.
Thank you.
I've only heard this 300 times.
Just crack my back, please. So now we're going to move on to the Y chromosome. It's the genetic marker that determines if an embryo will develop as a male, and it's passed down from father to son.
Yes.
So we're looking at the guys right now. And since he had no surviving children, we need to trace his lineage further back, all the way to Edward III.
Ooh, yes.
The guy that everyone's related to when they start fighting in the War of the Roses.
Of course.
And from Edward III, it goes to a man named John of Gaunt, and he has male descendants all the way down to a family known as the Somersets.
Oh, the Somersets.
The Somerset family members that agreed to the DNA testing did want to remain anonymous. They're like, we don't mind you saying it's our family, but keep like our names and faces out of the news.
Yeah, fair enough.
So ideally, living male relatives of Richard III would share nearly identical Y chromosomes. However, there's something called false paternity events, where the biological father is not the assumed father.
Oof.
So variations in the Y chromosomes are not always possible. That's what happens in this family. It's found that they have probably more than one instance of false paternity.
Oh boy.
So they're unable to trace him through that line because we don't know who the real dads are. You know, you're told this is your dad, but it's not.
Oh my God.
Type of thing.
So there's some hussies in that line.
Andrew! Not at all. You don't know the circumstances. There's some false paternity in that line, for sure. So the Y chromosomes don't match, unsurprisingly. But they're like, yeah, we kind of figured because false paternity, apparently, according to like genealogists, it's typically happens with a rate of 1% to 2% per generation.
Okay.
So it's actually really hard to trace someone through their paternal line that far back.
What, like 20 generations or whatever?
Because it's very likely someone lied about who the daddy was. So despite the Y chromosome setback, researchers were still able to compile and assess all the other evidence that they had gathered from the location, the remains, the mitochondrial DNA, and they were able to calculate that in a conservative calculation that there's a 99.999% likelihood that these remains are in fact the remains of Richard III.
I'll take those odds.
I'll take them too.
Yeah, so I think that's case closed. Mm-hmm. That random skeleton that was found, it was like in a parking lot too.
It's in a parking lot in Leicester, yeah.
Yeah, in 2012.
Yep.
Is actually like the last king of England to die on the battlefield.
Isn't that crazy?
That's wild.
Of all places to end up in a parking lot.
Yeah.
Well, something that I found interesting was that in addition to confirming the identity of the remains, and this is just me because I really like weird stuff like this, they were also able to learn a little bit more about his lifestyle and diet. They determined that the king had eaten a high mixed protein diet of primarily meat and seafood. Soil analysis of the area where Richard's stomach would have rested also indicated that the king was infected with a roundworm at the time of his death.
Oh, no.
Ew.
Oh, like a tapeworm, basically.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Because he was eating a lot of meat, and back then I don't think they were taking the temperature and practicing safe food prep.
Right, like if you were to ask them, hey, can you cook me like a steak medium rare? You know, they're gonna look at you like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to throw that in there because Andrew knows I like weird medical stuff. He doesn't.
Yeah, you love that stuff and I hate it.
Mm-hmm. But I wanted to share it anyway. So the thrilling announcement came to the public on February 4th, 2013, when the university revealed to the world, we have found Richard III.
That's so wild. All those centuries.
After over 500 years, the mystery is finally solved.
Yes, you love these solved mysteries, don't you?
I actually really like unsolved mysteries.
You do. That's interesting.
But I've seen a lot of comments from weirdos saying they don't like unsolved mysteries. They're like, I prefer when you share the ones that are resolved, you know, which I get.
Yeah, because you want some sort of conclusion.
You want something satisfying at the end of a story.
Yeah.
So we have that here, and we don't always get that, as we saw with the
Island.
Princes in the Tower.
Right.
And with Alexander.
Alexander is like, I'm pretty, my gut is telling me like that body is Alexander.
The saint?
Yeah, St. Matthew.
St. Matthew, you're right.
I can't remember if it's St. Matthew or St. Mark.
Ooh, it's one of the M saints.
Yeah, and I don't remember which one. I think it's Matthew, though.
You're going to have to re-listen to your episode.
To my own episode. I literally did that episode. I'm like, I don't remember which one it was. But yeah, I think it's Alexander.
To be fair, religious history is definitely not your forte.
Yeah, that's also true.
Mm-hmm.
That is very true. But also Oak Island is, we really don't know.
Yeah.
I have my guess, but
right.
It's not conclusive.
I think most mysteries in history are unsolved.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah, and it is interesting to see what technology can do. Technology that people would have never imagined able to solve these mysteries. So sometimes I think of the things we still don't know or understand, like maybe there's something coming in the future that's going to help us figure this out.
Right. I feel that.
Mm-hmm. So King Richard III holds a significant place in English history, primarily due to Shakespeare and the Tudor propaganda, which portray him as a villainous usurper. His death at the Battle of Bosworth Field again marks the end of the Wars of the Roses and begins the Tudor dynasty. The discovery of his remains in 2012 under a parking lot is a major archaeological historical event, which finally provides us with concrete evidence. And scientific analysis of the remains definitely sheds light on his appearance, his health, and the injuries he sustained in battle, which offers us a more nuanced understanding of the king. For example, we were finally able to affirm that he was not grotesquely deformed, as the Tudors had said. And this discovery also sparked renewed interest in his story and his legacy, and in people wanting to take a more nuanced look at him. He is a controversial figure for sure, but I do appreciate that we are now, even though it took over 500 years, able to see him with more context.
Yeah.
As a person under really unique circumstances, I'll say.
That's a really good way of putting it. I mean, very unique circumstances indeed.
It's also a reminder why archaeology is still so important and relevant.
Yes, I know.
There's so much for us to learn.
I mean, it really is like one half of the piece of the puzzle, right? Like history a lot of the times is like understanding like the narrative, looking at like primary sources and the documents. But archaeology is like kind of the backbone to that and provides
something concrete.
Yes.
Because even written sources, we see this all the time in the podcast. They're biased.
Right. They're biased. Or you're like, oh, okay, like how legit is this even?
Mm-hmm. And how come this is written like 100 years after the guy died?
Yeah, exactly. It very well could be like, oh, they're working off like a previous work that's now gone, but you don't know that. Could that also be like, oh yeah, they're taking stuff out of their behinds?
Yeah. So I really love having something so scientific, something that you can look at and say, okay, we know what this person would have looked like. We know what he would have eaten. We know what happened to him in battle. Like, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Our dream, weirdos, is to volunteer on an archaeological dig.
Yes, we really want to.
We don't know how or where to start. So if anyone knows of any digs that take volunteers, I don't care what it is or where it is, we want to go.
Yeah, hit us up.
I want to take one of those teeny little brushes and dust something off like this.
Ooh.
You know what I mean?
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. I want to find bones.
I was like, oh yeah, I kind of want to find like pottery or like coins. I really like that. Bones, no.
Would that spook you?
Like a little bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Again.
Unless it's like the long lost army of like Cambyses or something, then I would be like, oh my god, yes.
That could be a future episode.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, I think we did do that.
What?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Oh my god, weirdos! How long has it been?
Or it might have been part of like a broader like Persian succession gone wrong episode.
I think that sounds more familiar to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that is the end of the mystery now solved of Richard III's remains.
Oh, well, you did such an amazing job telling it, and I especially loved how there was a little like teaser mystery in the middle of your mystery.
The Prince is in the Tower. That is our unsolved mystery for sure.
Yeah, I really want to know.
I wish the church would just let them examine the remains.
I mean, it's same with the Church of England, same with the Orthodox or the Russian Orthodox Church or the Greek Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox, whatever. And the same with the Catholic Church. Just let us look at the bodies.
Like, come on, you
just like
guys.
teeny bit of like analysis.
Finding out what's going on with all of those remains, that's not what's going to turn people off religion, you guys.
Yeah.
You got bigger problems to address. Let us get the answers. We'll be more fans of you.
That's true.
We'll love you more.
Ironically, yeah, like if they're like, oh yeah, by the way, this isn't St. Matthew or St. Mark.
It's Alexander.
It's Alexander. Like people would
be like, that's so cool. Thank you for letting us know.
Exactly. And it doesn't, if anything, I feel like it would make the church look even better.
Yeah.
You're right.
Like you solved a mystery. That's huge. You gave the public answers.
Maybe you should personally write to Pope Francis.
Well, I assume he listens to the podcast.
If he doesn't, then I don't know what he's doing with his life.
Yeah, so I was speaking directly to him.
Okay.
And then to whoever is in charge of the Church of England. Same to you.
I think it's the monarch, technically.
Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah. It's the King of England. Or the Brit or whatever, Britain, UK.
I bet he listens. Right? Charles?
Charles. Oh my God. Imagine if he does listen and he's just hearing us go, Charles.
And he's like, I'm never listening again. Screw these guys. Okay, weirdos. But for real, that's the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this mystery journey.
Yes, thank you guys so much. As I said earlier, this was the penultimate episode. We will have one final one next week that you can listen to. And you guys know what to do right now. I mean, if you haven't done it, like, go follow us on Instagram especially. Hit the like or subscribe button on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening, and leave us a comment letting us know, like, how do you feel about Richard III? Is he cool? Is he not cool? Do you think that the two boys are actually in Westminster Abbey?
Yeah.
Let us know it all. We're always curious, and we always want you guys to give us your thoughts and opinions.
We love when weirdos share maybe even like a bit of information we didn't have. You get some insider knowledge sometimes.
Yeah.
Please keep the conversations going on Spotify and Instagram.
Yes. And that's all for this week, weirdos.
Until next time.
Adios.